Hey guys, welcome to my YouTube channel, or welcome back if you've been here before. My name is Liz and this is Let's Get Lizicle, where we do everything card making, and today is day 3 of our launch for my Merry Creepmas set, which will be available on July 20th, 2025 at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I am super excited about today's card. This is probably a little unconventional to add another person's products in with your own launch, but I've very rarely used one company's product on a card only. Generally, I like to mix and match, and I absolutely love the postage collage dies, as I know many other people do as well. And I just wanted to use them for a layout so that I could put a bunch of images on a card that didn't necessarily need to create a scene, and the postage collage dies are a good way to break up those images and just be able to like place them on a card however you want, and then it can help fill up some space without getting too busy. I'm only going to be adding 3 of the stamps to this card today, using 3 of the images from my Merry Creepmas set. I'm not even going to add a sentiment to this card today, just images on the postage stamps. And I think this is my favorite card of the ones that I've made for launch. The one I do for tomorrow is also pretty amazing, but I think this one, day 1 to 3, day 3 is my favorite. It just like turned out really well. I love the simplicity of it, but at the same time, it looks like it's a filled space. So for the background, I'm using this MFT cling stamp. It's just a bunch of stripes. They're unfortunately going out of business, so I will probably link somebody else down below unless they have this in stock still. I don't know when they're planning to fully close, but I will add something similar anyway in the description below. And I stamped it using my slate ink from Simon Says Stamp, which originally I was going to do it as a 2nd generation stamp. I probably should have just put this in my MISTI for positioning. But I decided to go with the full strength color. There was a few areas that didn't quite stamp well, so I ended up just trying to find a marker that matched, because it was just a few lines close to the edges, and fix those up real quick. And then I'm going to mat this on top of a red panel. So I cut the stripe panel down to, I think it was 3.5 by 4 3/4, and then I'm matting it with a 1/8 inch red cardstock, and then I have the mat of the card base itself. So this one already, we're cutting down that space by adding the mats to it, and then I can help fill up this other space in the center a little bit more by adding in the collage stamps, because if you leave that area bigger, it's going to look more empty. The smaller the area you make to put your images on, the more full it's going to look. Like, obviously you're not going to do a little like 1 by 2 in the middle of a card, but like it's good to, if you think a 4 1/4 by 5.5 is too big even for what you've planned, like if you're using, let's say, Mama Elephant's little agenda stamp sets, those are hard to fill up a card with unless you break up the space. So they're good for things like these postage stamps, and they're good for things like frame dies where there's a bunch of different sections in them. So if you're using smaller images, help break up the space to make it look more full. But anyway, back to the card. So I've laid out all of my squares that I'm using from the postage collage blocks die in my MISTI on the Waffle Flower grip mat. I love this thing for doing these types of postage collage cards. And because I wanted to be able to stamp these again, I'm leaving it on there while I color, because I kind of have them placed like wherever on the mat. I don't want to have to try to reposition it in the exact same position and it mess it up. So it's just easier for me to color it while it's in here and then stamp again, because they'll be in the exact same position, and I know that it's going to be in the exact same position. If you want, you could try adding down maybe some washi tape on one of the sides for repositioning if you want to take it out and you're not comfortable with coloring within your MISTI, but I find it much easier just to leave it in here. And for the coloring, I'm kind of going with a red teal color palette again. Like, I'm very much loving the teal as opposed to a standard like pine or forest green for Christmas. this year, so I'm doing a lot of like reds and teals instead. It's just like a fresher color palette, I think, and it still complements one another. And for the candy cane, I messed up the coloring on the bottom of the candy cane. The top of them look symmetrical 100%, but the bottom just kind of messed up a little. So I'm just going to reposition that. And I used the packaging from the stamp set, like the backing of the stamp set that is just a clear sheet of acetate to kind of like lay out the stamp where I wanted it on that block. Which is something I mentioned in, I think, yesterday's video would be a good way to position things, especially when you're working on something like the repeat pattern background that we did. If you're more comfortable with doing it with an acetate layer underneath for repositioning the stamp, like by all means, go ahead and do that. You could just use the packaging from the stamp in order to do that. So the coloring for this card is what took time for me, because there are 3 different like image panels that we're kind of coloring in. The die cutting and stamping of the backgrounds and whatnot was very quick and easy. This is the majority of the card, so I'm going to play some music while you guys watch me color, and I'll be back once that's done. So that's all done. If you guys watch the full coloring, you'll see at the very end that I colored the edges of these with the coordinating marker color. So for the background, I used this like light blue. So I went along the edges of the cardstock with the light blue just to make sure no white was showing. It's just a cleaner way to finish off your postage collage blocks. I do this when I do the stamping as well. I did a Father's Day card and I did a Halloween card doing that. And when I stamped on the edges of the cards with the silhouette stamps, I made sure to go over the edges with the black marker, kind of what you would do in the case where you're either cutting out sentiment that's been printed with like the black box and the white text, or if you're cutting them out from pre-bought ones, you kind of want to use a marker to cover those edges just so it looks like it's a black core cardstock and not white core cardstock. It just makes it look nicer and cleaner. And I ended up doing that with these as well. I just picked the coordinating color depending on where it was on the edge. For the tree, I just used the lighter teal just to cover it. It doesn't really matter which one you use. But I used the lighter one just in case it like bled onto the cardstock a bit and it wasn't going to have like a dark line there. You just have to be careful with that. And then for the star, when I designed this set, I kind of had the star so it could sit in multiple areas on the tree. So it can either sit on the top of that curve, because it's kind of like a whimsical tree where it's kind of like very flowy, but like very edgy. And for tomorrow's card, I put it on the top of the tree. For this one, I have it dangling from the tip, which is what I had originally planned for this. So I heat embossed that in gold and it looked really nice, but it was going to be the only gold on the card. So I decided to use the Christmas like cancellation marks on the rest of these. I did it in black on the tree. I'm going to go back and stamp over that and do the gold as well. One, because it didn't really show up very well because the tree is so dark, and two, because I used gold on the other ones, and because I didn't want to cover the images too much, I just used the little snowflakes that were included in the set for both the snowman and the candy cane ones. I used one that I think it says North Pole on the one I used on the tree, and it took me a hot minute to line it up because it's so tonal with the background. Like, it just kind of blends in. It's very hard to reposition. That one I probably should have used the acetate trick where you put the stamp on the acetate and move it around to where you need it, just because the stamps tend to stick to your fingers. And it would have definitely benefited me and worked a lot faster. And then I used the same snow ones on the candy cane because I didn't want to cover up any of the image with the other stamps. I kind of positioned the other stamps over it, but they were all kind of like awkward shapes and just covered like a big portion of the stamp because it is a smaller image. So I'm going to just add the snowflakes to this one as well, just to bring the gold throughout all three images. So I went back and forth between adding the embossing powder and then heating them because I wasn't sure if I was going to add all of the gold to everything, but I decided that once I added it to the tree and the snowman that the candy canes needed something, especially since I wasn't going to be using any of the other cancellation marks. This is me trying to line up that North Pole cancellation stamp. And again, it took me a hot minute because the black was blending in so much with the background. It was hard to see if the stamp was lined up with the lines that were already there. Since I'm going to be heat embossing this, if it was a little off, I don't think it would have mattered too much because it would have maybe looked more like some kind of drop shadow to it if it was a little off. But I wanted to try to get on top of it as much as possible. And then because of the powder that I had on my mat from stamping the other ones, it became a little bit less sticky and the image just kind of came up with the stamp. So I had to like reposition it again, and I made sure I pressed it real good into the grip mat so that it wouldn't move. And it turned out pretty good. I think I got it on point, so we're good there. But I'm going to add these all onto their postage background, and then I'm going to position on the card a little kind of wonky this time. I think all the other times I've done this, I've kind of like done them straight on, so it's either like straight horizontal or vertically for every single stamp. And I've been seeing a bunch of these on like Pinterest and other videos lately where people are just kind of putting them on a little wonky, and I was just like, you know what, I'm gonna do it that way just because it looks nice, and it just again helps fill up the space. It doesn't have to be so clean cut. I did put the snowman one straight on, which is fine. Because the other two were on the other like opposite angles. So I wanted to make sure that it wasn't on the same angle as one of the other ones. And I just kind of like tucked it on to the bottom corner there. And then I wanted the tree one to kind of be somewhat in the same distance from the top and sides as the other two. So you'll see me placing it lower here, but I actually want it up a little bit higher. And then I forgot that when I took off the tape release and tried to position it lower again. I'm like, that's not where I want it. So I moved it up. But anyway, that's pretty much our card for today. I'm going to add a few of the gold foiled confetti again. So I'm going to futz with this for the rest of the video. But thanks again for joining me for today, guys. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, comment down below, and let me know your thoughts. Release date is tomorrow if you're watching this on the 19th. So super exciting. And you'll be able to purchase this starting noon tomorrow, Eastern Standard Time. I'll have one more video at noon tomorrow for the launch, and we are going to have some fun mixing this Merry Creepmas set with my Sassy Santa set from last year. So stay tuned for that. So if you're not already subscribed to my channel, please subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any future content. Head on over to my Instagram or Facebook if you want additional content. As I post there a few other days of the week, just mostly older cards that I've done and like other ones in between. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day, and until tomorrow, thanks guys, bye.